Today, I'm formally issuing a new presidential policy directive to improve how we work to bring home American hostages and how we support their families. I've signed a new executive order to ensure our government is organized to do so.
There are more than 30 Americans currently being held hostage abroad, little more than bargaining chips for American cash, every second facing the possibility of execution. President Obama made the call this week. While the government will stick to its stated and often muddled policy of no concessions to the abductors, they will also allow government officials and even families of those being held to talk with the terrorists and seek to obtain their freedom. Are we then doing the humanitarian thing and leaving no stone unturned? Or are we merely feeding into the terror and opening a dangerous door to more kidnappings, more terror, and more executions? Our guest is a former reporter for the Associated Press, his life changing forever, March 16, 1985, when he was taken hostage by Hezbollah Shiite Muslims, supported by Iran, and held in captivity for nearly 7 years. No one can grasp the enormity of this decision better than Terry Anderson. Terry, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
The president says that he was righting a wrong. In your opinion, did he right a wrong here, or did he get it wrong again?
I think he went a long way toward fixing something that has badly needed fixing for a long time. The government's stated policy of not negotiating with or rewarding hostage takers or kidnappers sounds good in theory, but in actual fact, in practice, it has been very, very hard on families of the hostages, because that policy has been interpreted to mean they can't even talk to the families. They won't tell the families anything about what's going on. They won't talk to the kidnappers. They won't, in fact, really do anything very much in these cases. And that is not only not a productive policy, it's a kind of a foolish policy. And to have the president look at it again and say this is not right is very encouraging to everybody concerned. I know a number of families of people who are hostage right now, and they have been very upset and very angry at the way that policy has been carried out. They've been threatened with prosecution if they make any contact with the kidnappers. And that's a pretty harsh attitude to take. So I'm very glad to see President Obama look at it again and try to improve it.
Terry, what about those who say that if you then acquiesce, if you deal with the hostages, all you're doing is buying into their mantra, their agenda, if you will, and you're only making it more dangerous?
How dangerous can we make it? It's already as dangerous as it possibly can be. Has this policy, in fact, cut down on the number of Americans kidnapped or the number of journalists kidnapped overseas? I don't think so. It hasn't had any effect at all. So changing it probably isn't going to have any effect either. Look, the point is, you can't pay ransom. You can't reward the hostage takers. But you can't get anything done if you won't even talk to them or allow anybody else to talk to them either. When there's a bank robbery and the robber takes hostages, what's the first thing they do?
They usually try to negotiate, sure.
They call in the negotiator. Now, he's not there to give them a car or a reward or anything. He's there to talk him out of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Is it going to work with hostage takers? I don't know. I mean, these people, ISIS, seem to be an entirely new and vicious player in this game, and I don't know how they will react, but I can't see how it's going to do any harm. In fact, I and my fellow hostages were released by a negotiator who gave our kidnappers no reward, nothing. He simply talked them out of doing what they were doing. A man named Johnny Pico, who I will be meeting later this afternoon, he's a good friend of mine now, the former Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, came to Lebanon repeatedly, allowed himself to be literally kidnapped so that he could negotiate with the people who were holding us. And over the space of a year and a half, he convinced them that this was not useful, that they were not going to get any gain out of it, and eventually they released us. Can that be done again? I don't know. And we won't know if we don't try it.
Then let's get that perspective, if you will, Terry, because you hit on the next point here. Let's also welcome to MidPoint the former Deputy Commissioner of Police in Nassau County, New York, and a former hostage negotiator, Bill Flanagan. Bill, we thank you for joining us, and Terry brought up some very interesting points here. This is a different breed of kidnapper that we're dealing with now in ISIS and others. They are much more militant. So can you use the techniques that we have done for so many years and used for so many years successfully and make them now work and work better with these kinds of killers?
And Mr. Anderson hit the nail on the head here. There is a difference in the dynamic here. That does not mean, however, that negotiations cannot be successful. Everything is negotiable. We need to understand what it is that these parties that take hostages, that kidnap people, that demand ransoms are looking for, and we need to leverage their needs against the needs of getting those hostages repatriated.
Is it possible, and again, I'll ask you the same thing in a different sense that I, excuse me, asked Terry, if you now negotiate with them, if you now start to offer them money, if you work with them more, do you agree or disagree with those people who say you're only opening the door for this to get even worse and for more people to be kidnapped because the terrorists are going to see the opportunity to make more money?
Look, the policies announced, the new policies announced by the Obama administration go a long way to easing the concerns of the hostages' families. And I laud the president for that. No one should be subjected to federal prosecution for trying to repatriate their loved ones. That being said, in context, it does create some very problematic situations. Hostage taking, kidnapping around the world is a $1.5 billion a year business. It funds everything from terrorism to criminal enterprises. The kidnapping and ransom insurance industry deals with these kinds of issues every day. The dynamic, as Mr. Anderson talked about, the Islamic State, other emerging semi-states, non-criminal kinds of organizations do present a different set of parameters to a negotiation. Again, I believe that these issues can be resolved through negotiating techniques, but they're definitely going to have to be realigned.
Terry, I've got a couple of minutes left here, so let me just ask, with regard to the government itself, is it fair to say that there are families right now as we speak and in the recent past who have acted without government knowledge in the first place or despite what the government tells them simply because they don't trust the government to get it done because the government themselves keeps a lot of things from the families?
Well, it is certainly true that the government has been very reluctant to tell the families anything that they know and to deal with them on any regular basis at all. You need to remember, by the way, that the president did say that this change in policy, these changes, do not involve changing the policy of not paying ransom or not rewarding the kidnappers. And, you know, I think that is right. I agree with him. We can't set up a market in hostages. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be talking. Talking is just that. Is it going to open the way for more kidnapping? I don't see how we can get any more kidnapping than we already have. Certainly for journalists working in dangerous areas, this is the most dangerous that it has ever been to be a journalist. I know the family of James Foley, who was executed. They have been working very hard to get this policy changed because of their own personal experience. So, yes, certainly in the part that deals with the families, this is a welcome improvement, and I'm sure that if they carry it out the way they promised, it will do some good.
We will follow up the story with both of you. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but this is something that will not go away, that we need to continue to follow on. Terry Anderson, we thank you so much for your time. Bill Flanagan, yours as well. We will continue to follow this story. We'll talk to you both again. Stay with us. We question everything. This is MidPoint.